an inconsistent process will create inconsistent results. And then once I learned how to talk to sellers and convert leads, 100K a month happened within 90 days. It really isn't that difficult. And to me, like, you know, I think 100K a month as a wholesaler is, you're still entry level. You're still kind of getting there. You're not like a big dog at 100K a month.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have a full company until you're doing 5 to 20. That's where like the real big dogs are. So you can get to 100K a month with one person and a good sales process.
All right, welcome to the show. I'm Julian Castle, and today I'm sitting down with a real estate investor named Jon. Jon is a former Recon Marine turned real estate investor. He's had a portfolio upwards of about 86 properties. He just recently sold about 45 units and more, and he has about a dozen properties right now. But he has a 7-figure wholesaling business, and he teaches people the sales systems that can transform everyday investors into closers. So, Jon, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Bro, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be talking to a fellow Colombian.
Yeah, man. Jon is in Colombia right now, and he's living his best life. So let's give it up. So before we dive in, you know, Jon, can you just tell us a little bit about your what your business looked like monthly or annual revenue, team size, and how many markets you're in?
Yeah, so one acquisitions manager. I have a dispo and then an operations guy. I have one lead manager. I do a lot of the closings as well, so it's a relatively small team. Mostly we focus on like the low time marketing channels, so we just do PPC and YouTube, and we do about $100,000 a month. So we've done, to be specific, this last year we did 1.16 million in revenue, and so we've been consistently at about that $1 million a month mark $1 million a year mark for about the last 2 years.
Nice. Okay, amazing. And as a business owner, what are the profit margins like, you know, for the business that you have?
Last month was fun. This month was May was incredible. We had 75% profit margins, but that's not typical for us. So like we netted 92K last month, but normally depending on how big, because I've had a bigger team where I've got down in the 30s, but I like to stay about 40% profit margin.
Nice. That's amazing. That's incredible, man. You are crushing it. All right. So tell us a little bit about your snapshot, you know, of your time in the military. What kind of mindset or discipline did you get, and did you transfer into business?
Dude, that's a great question. So I was a Recon Marine. You have to go through a little bit of a selection process to become a Recon Marine. So I did this right out of high school, and I started with, you know, there's like 120 people. And they basically just kind of kick the shit out of you, drown you in the pool, make you run a lot, you know, get wet and sandy at the beach until they whittle you down. So out of those 126 people, I think we ended up having 14 that stayed, including me. And then they put us together in like another class that had 14, and then they whittle you down to like another 20. So it's a high attrition rate. And basically at the time, my whole thing was, let me just get to lunch and then let me just get to dinner. So that was my mindset inside of the selection process in the military. It was difficult. It was by far the hardest thing that I'd ever done. And so I never could look at, well, how am I going to make it through the entire, 6-month selection process? If I ever looked at that, I would get intimidated. So I would just think whenever things were getting hard, like, dude, I'm just going to get to lunch. Like, if I can just get to lunch, I get, a 15-minute break. I get to eat a sandwich. And then, you get done with lunch, you go back out and you get beat up a little bit more. And then I go, okay, let me just get to dinner. And so what that taught me is a couple of things. One, everything is just one step in front of the other. You just take one step and then keep walking, and eventually you end up hitting your destination. And so when I ended up getting out of the military, I didn't have any skills, that were applicable to real estate, investing, making money in general. Like, all of my friends were either joining, like a different SF group or going into like a different part of the military, going into SWAT teams and stuff like that. And here I am saying I'm going to go get rich being a real estate investor, not knowing anything. And so I just took the same approach that I learned in the military. It was just like, hey, one step in front of the other, like just, take one step every single day. And that's what got me to where I am now. And it also got me through some really difficult times. I lost a lot of money in 2022 flipping houses and, ended up finding myself in over $500,000 of debt that I owed back to private money lenders. And same thing, I was overwhelmed. I was like, dude, there's no way I'm going to be able to get out of this. But I took the approach of like, let me just make it to lunch today and let me do the things that I need to do. And ended up, helping me find the success that I have now just by, hey, I know that the first thing I need to do is learn how to do marketing. And then, so I started doing that. And then, okay, I'm not very good at sales. Let me go get some sales training. Let me focus on my sales. I need to hire a dispo. Let me talk to other people. And that's the main thing that I learned from the military is basically just don't quit. And there's a famous Hormozy quote, you can't fail unless you quit. And so I took that, man, and that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Congrats. Okay, so it sounds like you gave us a little bit of understanding about your transition into wholesaling real estate. But like, what was it like? I know you could have picked, anything else, any other thing, like e-commerce, Amazon FBA, whatever, drop shipping, crypto. I don't know. Like, what was it for you that like, why did real estate stand out, or is wholesaling specifically, to you at that point?
So I was pretty lucky. I was terrible with money when I was in the military. Like I would, when you start out, you make $1,200 a month. And for me, coming as a 18-year-old out of Louisiana, I was like, that's a lot of money. Like I get to spend $1,200 a month on guns. And, everybody in the military, they buy guns, they get tattoos, and then they go and spend the rest on alcohol. And that's what I did until I went on deployment, and I just couldn't spend the money that I was making. Only because I was stuck on a ship or in a different country, and there was nothing to spend money on. So I ended up saving about $35,000, and I was like, all right, well, everybody that's rich, they invest in stocks. And so I'm sitting there in the little like command room. They have a spot where you can get on your computers, and I used to just trade stocks, and I was excited that I would make like, $100 on a stock. And eventually this military officer comes in, and he's talking about investing. He's like, you got to get into real estate. And I've never heard anybody say that. I thought that was just for people that were super rich. And he explained to me the concept of leverage. He's like, look, you have, $100,000. Instead of buying one $100,000 house, you buy five, $100,000 houses with 20% down. And walked me through the process and was convincing enough to where I was like, okay, I need to start learning about this. And the rest of my time, I was looking at, reading books. I read like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Bigger Pockets books, all of the first time books that everybody does, right? Yeah. And as I was transitioning, that was the only thing I focused on, was just reading books about investing in real estate. I realized that if I'm going to stay in the military, it's going to take me a long time to build a rental portfolio with the money that I make. You don't make a ton in the military. And so I was like, all right, well, what else can I do? And I started looking for active ways to make money with real estate without a ton of money without requiring a lot of money, because I knew flipping houses took a lot of money. And then listening to a podcast, I heard about wholesaling. And I was like, all right, that sounds like it, because you can make active money, but you are still in real estate. You still get that real estate experience. You get to learn how to underwrite properties. You get to learn what investors are looking for. And so that was where I was like, this is the thing. Like, it just kind of felt right for me. I was like, this is the thing that I want to get into, because I will learn the real estate industry while I'm still making money. And that led me down the journey of going to meetups, starting, direct mail, starting SMS campaigns back when that was really popular. And that's how I got started, bro. Just grinding it out in a barracks room, doing SMS texting, calling like 10 to 20 people a day that were responding to my texts, and then trying to get a deal, because I had no idea what I was doing. It took me way too long.
Okay. So is that some of your early challenges there as well? It's just like learning the whole process, trying trial and error, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest challenge when I was getting started is I had no idea how to talk to sellers. And they didn't have, back in like 2019, 2020, they didn't have as many people that were teaching that stuff. At least I didn't really know about them. I knew about like Bigger Pockets, but nobody that was teaching you how to talk to sellers. So I had no real sales process. I was following I kind of had like the idea of like the 4 pillars I was following, but I mean, there were so many deals that I had lost. I should have got, based on what I was doing in the market, I should have gotten a deal within my first 30 days. Instead, it took me 8 months to get my first deal, and I had just enough to invest back and kind of do it all over. And that one step in front of the other kind of got me through it. But man, it took me way too long to get a first deal.
Okay. Congrats. So tell us, like, walk us through your first few deals. Like, what worked and what didn't. Like,
dude, so my first deal was from an SMS campaign, and it was just pure luck. A person had the asking price that I was looking for, and I happened to run into some people from like actually doing the SMS blasts and stuff like that. Yeah. I had talked to other investors as well, and I knew that there were people that were buying in San Diego. So the first deal just kind of fell in my lap. It was like, hey, this is my asking price if you can do it. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Let me figure out how to get a DocuSign together and send it over to them. And I actually used a real estate agent at the time to help me with the comparables to make sure that it was something that I could buy, because I didn't know how to comp properties, right? Like I really didn't, like, okay, 75% of the ARV, but what the heck is an ARV? How do you do it? So I met a real estate agent at a meetup, and I used them to like help me comp it. And that was how I did my first deal. I ended up doing a couple others until I ended up meeting these guys that were flipping houses, and they were like, dude, let's just partner up. We'll flip the houses, you bring us the deals, and we'll split all the profit. And I had a huge learning curve from that, because that's actually when I started to learn how to flip houses. And that took me to like, doing a flip every month or two, all the way up to where we had like 5 active flips on the market until the market shifted in 2022 and we lost all that money. So that was like my journey going into real estate investing.
Okay, cool. So let me ask you this: like, when did you realize this could be become a real business and not just a hustle?
Probably after a full year into it, I ended up joining a mastermind called 7-Figure Flipping. Mostly flippers, but it's a really cool community full of other real estate investors. There are people doing Airbnbs and stuff like that. And I was in a military community where there were guys doing real estate investing. One of my buddies was already in it. Talked to him, ended up joining, and then I go to my first mastermind, like actual in-person mastermind. And that's when I realized, like, I sat down to this one guy talking about my business. He walks away. Somebody else like, you know who you were just talking to? I was like, no. He's like, he does like $3 million a year, wholesaling and flipping houses in Utah. And that was just like some guy sitting next to me, like a 30-year-old guy. I would never have guessed that he was doing big deals. I thought I was a big player because I had made it into like the 6-figure mark, making $100,000 a year. And then this guy comes sitting next to me, and then they start, we do the breakout rooms. People start talking about KPIs, like tracking KPIs, hiring people based on their personality and like disc profiles and all stuff that to me now is like, it seems like common sense. But at the time I was like, what the heck are KPIs? What do you mean these people have businesses like with employees and stuff like that? And so that was where I realized this is not just a hustle. This is not just a way to buy rental properties. Like, people make a living off of this. And I was in a group full of, 110, 120 other real estate investors that full-time making a living off of doing what they like to do. That was where it kind of opened up my eyes.
That's awesome. So that the first few deals, like, how much were you making in those first few deals? And like
$4,000, $5,000.
That's awesome. A lot of people don't know, but like, it's not glamorous to get started. It's not. So some people get like an 80K rip, at the beginning, but like most people is like very small, So yeah. So what markets did you focus on? I mean, like why go ahead.
Yeah. So SoCal, because it was my backyard, and so I started in SoCal, and then I realized, like, holy shit, this is pretty difficult in here, and so I started going to my hometown, which is Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. I started doing some deals out there, and I did a couple wholesale deals, again, like 5 to 10,000 maybe like we did, I don't know, we did one that was like 15K.
Yeah.
Nothing big, right?
Yeah.
And then as I started to, like, as I got in the community, I started doing more deals. I realized that it's better to have a property that everybody wants than be in like these, tertiary markets that are out in the sticks and have a really good deal on a property that nobody wants. It's just,
Right.
it was just less headache. So
Right.
as I was starting, I went everywhere. I did deals in Texas, deals in Florida, Louisiana, New York. Let me think about some of the other. I mean, I think those were like the main states, and then obviously California. And I just decided, like, okay, anybody that has a deal, I'm going to do it. And then as I started to realize the business a little bit more, I realized that if you can lock up properties at a good price in a competitive market, it's so much easier because selling the deal is easy. And I'll give you an example. And Missouri. I left out Springfield, Missouri. I did a lot of deals there.
Yeah.
In those markets where the average home price is $120,000, you get people that hem and haw over like a 5K non-refundable EMD. They want inspections. They want, all this craziness. And then you go to a market like SoCal or some of the more competitive markets, and the investors there, that they're pros. They do it for a living. They flip houses for a living. They flip hundreds of homes a year. 25K non-refundable EMD, no questions. It's like, hey, you send them the purchase agreement. EMD's in by end of day, $25,000 non-refundable, and it's going to close. So what that allowed me to do is just go lock up more deals because I'm not babying these investors. That's their first time deal, putting down 5K EMD after they do a 14-day inspection, plumbing inspection, foundation inspection, all these different things that they learn that they're supposed to do. I would have to baby these other investors. And I realized like this is just a lot of work to make less money. Whereas if I go to SoCal or I go to a market that is competitive, it's a lot harder to get deals. You have to be a lot better. You have to be a lot more skilled. But if you do get them, you get some big spreads, and it's a lot easier on the back end.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. So how'd you build your team to help scale the operation?
So I started with Dispo. My first hire, well, actually, let me back up. I had a guy who I met at a real estate meetup that I was speaking at. And he was like, dude, I just want to come work for you. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll do whatever you want. I was like, all right, just start calling agents, bro. Like, I don't want to spend my marketing dollars on you because he didn't really come off as like a direct-to-seller guy. He was a young kid, but he was hungry and he was personable. I was like, dude, just start calling agents. So that was my first hire. This guy, besides like VAs, I hired a bunch of VAs, obviously. When we were flipping, I hired a girl to help me with like the flips and stuff like that. I should say we hired back when I had those partners. But then like as I build my business, my actual wholesale operation, VAs for like helping me with the lead management. My real hire was an acquisitions guy. And then his friend that he was also in a prior business with reached out and was like, hey, same thing. I'll do whatever you need. I was like, well, I need help with Dispo. Funny enough, that guy, I don't recommend doing that now, but I got super lucky. That guy worked all the way up, ended up closing $2.5 million in assignment fees, but like just him, and is now, he has equity in my company and runs like the entire operations side of things. And so I got lucky with him. He was my first hire. Then I went and hired an acquisitions manager. After I was already doing about 100K a month, I was like, all right, I need somebody to help me. I hired an acquisitions manager from there and started building a team. So from there, I got to hire 2 acquisitions managers, 3. The most I ever had at one time was 4. And I had a team of 4 setters at the as well, being able to book appointments for them. And then as far as like Dispo, you really only need 1 full-time Dispo rep until you get to like over 7-10 deals a month. And so for us, we have a big average deal size. I've never had to hire more. I have hired 2 Dispo reps at one point, but it didn't last because we didn't have enough deals to make sense for 2 full-time Dispo people. Right. So my team has not been like a steady, hey, I'm going to hire people and everybody stays and it just grows. It's been, hey, we've built it up and then we've pulled back a little bit to focus more on profit. And now our sweet spot is where we're at now. It's just really just focusing on profit margin instead of, hey, let me go hire a bunch of people. But it started with that very first guy who just reached out to me. Second guy reached out to me. Then I started getting smarter, posting jobs on WiseHire, hiring acquisitions managers. I've built out an entire process now to hire people. But that wasn't, it was just like word of mouth at the beginning.
That's amazing. Okay, cool. Super cool. Yeah. Alrighty. So, tell us a little bit about the NEPQs in sales psychology,
Yeah.
because you're known for teaching NEPQ. So what is it in your own words?
In my own words, it's a sales process that works with human behavior. That's the best way I can put it. And so instead of, I went through a lot of sales training prior from like the masterminds I was in and seeing what other people are doing. And what I've noticed is there's a lot of sales resistance from these sellers that come in. Like when they call you, they're not necessarily excited to talk to you, right? They don't necessarily want to open up. And a lot of times they don't want to tell you what their pain points are because they just think of every salesperson as some salesy, scumbag that's trying to just steal their home. And what I did the 4 pillars before, because that's what I learned in some of the masterminds that I was in. And what I noticed is I just always felt like I was leaving money on the table. I knew I was losing deals that I could have closed, or I would see deals go to other competitors. I was like, why did they get it and I didn't? We were around the same price. And it all came down to trust. The seller just trusted the other person that they would get the result better than I would. And so when I started looking into other sales programs that were outside of the real estate industry and I found Jeremy, I noticed that it was much more involved in like tonality, the way you ask the questions, and then lowering any sort of guard that the seller has. Because as long as the seller has their guard up, they're not going to open up to you. You're not going to be able to solve their problems. You're not going to help them solve their problems. And so when I started learning that, the main thing that they teach that's different than everything else is they teach you how sales is 80% about how you ask the question, only 20% about the questions that you're asking. So they teach you the tonality, the ways that you're supposed to be asking the questions. They focus much more on the psychology rather than reading a script. And so I had these scripts that I would get from other investors, and it was just like, all right, tell me about the condition. And I could just feel the seller didn't trust me at all. They were like, they had gone through that process a million times. Yeah. Whereas with NEPQ, it's taking you through a framework that you help the seller understand their problems, right? Once they understand their problems, you understand what they're looking for, their future state, where they want to go. And then you go through, you find out how much they need to be able to accomplish that. You get a commitment from them that if you do solve those problems, they will move forward with you at that point. And that was where my close rate, I used to close at 12, 15%. And that was where my close rate jumped to 30, 35% on average, just from being able to learn how to speak to sellers, how to work with human behavior.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you were able to essentially 3x your closing rate using this framework, and I want you to touch on I guess talk about it a little bit, because you make these differences sound like very logical, but I'm sure they go into a little bit, they're deep, I guess so. Like, what kind of process do you take the seller through that actually
I'll walk you through it. So the first part is our connection phase. And the first 7 seconds of any call, the seller's going to pick up, is this a sales call or is this not? In the first 7 seconds. And so if you call the seller all excited, you say, hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey, Bob, how's it going today? What happens immediately? The guard goes up, right? They're like, this is a salesperson. Nobody's that excited, right? And then using language in the first 15 to 30 seconds of your call, saying things like, hey, I'm just calling to see if we're a good fit. I'm just trying to make a deal here. Or, hey, I just asked that you give me a confident yes or no. Or like you tell me yes or no at the end of this call. All of those things that we've been taught in the past are now wired in the seller's brain to go, this is a sales call, right? Our brain is programmed to pick up on patterns. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to interrupt those patterns so we can lower that guard with the seller. Instead of me saying, hey, Bob, how you doing? I'm going to use a curious tonality, opening up the call. Hey, Bob, can you hear me? Yeah, who's this? Yeah, it's just Jon Lallande over at ABC Homebuyers. It looks like you just filled out a form on our website about possibly selling a home on Main Street. Is that right? I'm going curious there, right?
Yeah.
And instead of me setting some like hard expectation, hey, this call is to see if we're a good fit. And if I'm a good fit for you, you're a good fit for me. And then at the end, I want a confident yes or no. I'm going to lower that guard even more by just downplaying the call. I'll say, yeah, in this call, it's pretty basic. It's really more for us to learn a little bit more about the condition, you know, when you're looking to sell and maybe a little bit more about what you're looking for just to see if we can help. Just very, very non-salesy, right? And so once I understand, I actually lower the resistance with the seller. I want to understand their real situation. Where are they at? What got them there, right? So what I do is I break out 3 different avatars: homeowners, investors, and vacant properties. And then I have questions that are directed towards each one of those avatars. And it might sound like this. If it's a homeowner, I might say, oh, where are you headed next? Why are you going there? Oh, how does that compare to where you're at now though? Right? Just questions that are naturally going to get them to open up, instead of me saying right in the first couple seconds, something like, so tell me why you're looking to sell. Because if I say that, so tell me why you're looking to sell, a lot of times the seller just gets resistant. They're like, that's none of your business. Or why are you asking me that question? Why is that relevant? But if I can have a natural conversation with them, again, using a sales process that works with human behavior, then I will get them to open up and tell me really where they're at. After I understand their situation, I talk about their problems. That's problem awareness. And I want them to feel some of those pain points. People make changes once the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of changing, right? So I want them to feel some of those pain points, relive some of those pain points, because that's what's going to help them make a decision to change. And so I'll ask them questions to get them to relive some of the pain points that they're feeling. Once I understand all of that, I go into my solution awareness phase, which is finding out, once that problem no longer exists, what are they looking to accomplish? They might say, I want to move into a safer neighborhood. Okay, and where would you actually move? Well, there's this community right here that, you know, that's gated. I'll be able to walk my kids. I'm going to get them to feel their excitement about moving to the future, right? About that future state. Once I have all of that, this is one of the big changes that we do. Instead of asking, so tell me how much are you looking to get for the property, where their brain goes to the Zillow price, their brain goes to, you know, the highest price they can think of, I focus on what do they need to solve that problem. And so when they tell me, well, I really want to go to this safer neighborhood so that way my wife can walk her kids around the block, and we don't have to worry about people breaking in anymore. Okay, what neighborhood are you moving into? How much do the houses cost? How much do you need in your pocket to put down on that next house? I know that if I can help them get those needs, if I can say, hey, they need $20,000 for the down payment on the next house, I'm going to ask them, hey, let's say I could get you the $20,000 and we're able to do it in 3 weeks so you don't lose the deposit on the next house. What would be your biggest concern at that point? And so that's my process that I bring people through. And the very last step, this is another common mistake that I see people make, is they just throw out an offer. They just say, hey, our offer is $100,000. Now what the seller does is they take that offer, they put it in their back pocket, and then they go shop it around to a bunch of other people, because they never said that they were going to move forward if you can get them $100,000. They just were like, I just want to see what your offer is. So what we do is we say, hey, let's say I can solve your problem, right? Let's say I can get you the $20,000 in your pocket so you no longer have to live in this dangerous neighborhood. We can get you into that safer house in the next 3 weeks, and then we can help you with your stuff. If we do all of that for you, what's your biggest concern? Oh, I don't have any concerns. Okay, what would you want the next steps to be? And we don't move forward until they say, I want you to type up an agreement. I want you to send me that offer, and I will review it together. And so I want to make sure that I get a commitment from them that they are going to move forward before I send out the offer. That way they don't just shop it around and go to a bunch of other companies try to get my offer beat. That's like and as little as I do like 2-hour master classes where I teach the sales process in depth. I think we talked about it for like 3 or 4 minutes. In about 3 or 4 minutes, that's the best I can explain this process of how I walk through it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. Super cool. All right. So tell me, I guess, because I want to take it a little bit to the next level here.
Yeah.
So I use the RJ Bates sales model.
Yeah.
Hey, is this John?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me how much
Hey,
you're looking to get for the property.
how much you looking to get for the property?
Tell me a little bit about what you got going on.
what you
Yeah.
got going on. And so, and then obviously you talk about, condition and all that and timeline.
Yeah.
But like, what's wrong with that in your eyes? Or not that there's anything wrong with that, but like,
Thank
why,
you.
why is there?
Yeah, I want to go on the record and say a lot of people think that because I am a sales trainer that I hate all of these other guys, and like I'm like, oh yeah, all these other people suck and their process is completely ass backwards, and like I should be like opposed to all of these other people. I first of all, I really like the content that RJ Bates puts out. I do like some things about his sales process a lot, and so like a lot of people use that process. One, because it's so simple, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very simple. And let me tell you some of the good things before I tell you some of the things that I do differently or maybe I don't agree with, because I'd rather just start with the positive things first, right?
Yeah.
What he does phenomenally, what RJ teaches, is one, if you're like trying to get your first deal, that's an easy process to follow. Like, hey, tell me a little bit about how much you're looking to get for the property. Tell me a little bit about what you got going on. Go into condition, go into everything from there. And so it's a really simple process to follow, which I think if you're getting your first deal, there's a lot of benefit to that, to not having to learn a process that, teaches you about psychology, teaches you about tone, teaches you about how to get sellers to open up. I mean, you're talking about like two different levels here, right? One is going to be like a script you can follow. Another is like mastery of being able to understand the entire fundamentals behind sales. Now, what he does so well, and what I really do like about his sales process, is his status frame. And so when you are using that sort of sales process, you have the higher status the entire time. It's like, I don't even know if I want to buy this yet. You tell me why I should buy this, right? What that's doing in the seller's brain is you are going to be the authority figure. You're the one that's making the decision. They're qualifying to you, right? Which is a good frame to have. Versus what a lot of other sales trainers teach, which is like, hey, I just said, saying something like, hey, is now a bad time? Well, thanks so much for picking up the call. I'm really excited to talk to you. Things like that are just lowering your status, making you like a lowly salesperson. He doesn't do any of that, which I really, really respect about his sales process. And I think as you're getting started, if you want something simple, completely okay. So that being said, the things that I like to do differently and the things that I teach that are different is, one, most of that, like if you ask the seller right in the first couple of seconds, so tell me how much you're looking to get for the property, right? They are going to go default to that price-based thinking of, hey, I want the Zillow price or XYZ, unless they're just like a complete laydown, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to give you my price right off the bat, right? But they haven't felt any of those pain points. They haven't felt any of the motivation. They haven't felt that future state. You're not really problem solving to figure out, hey, can I actually solve your problem with the money that I'm giving you? And so it's going to be hard to objection handle later, which is fine. He doesn't teach a ton of objection handling. Usually it's like, oh, that price doesn't work. You should just go with a realtor, right? Getting started, good. You're not going to be good enough to objection handle yet, right? But as you start getting more experience, you start running a team, then you can go, okay, well, how do we actually objection handle these sellers? And we need to understand their pain and their future state. That's one thing, okay? The second part is when you go into like, so tell me a little bit about what you got going on with the property. I see his point of view of, hey, I'm trying to get sellers to focus on what's important to them. The problem that a lot of our students have had when they use that process is the seller might go into like just straight condition. Like, oh, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. What else do you need to know? Right? And they just throw it back on you. And then you're like, I need to know why you're looking to sell. Like, it's a hard process to get them consistently into their motivation. And then lastly, the main thing that we focus on, which is much different than not just his process, but like anybody's process, is we teach you how to use your tone, verbal cues, and be able to get sellers to open up to you when they normally wouldn't, right? Like those type A sellers that normally are going to be pretty closed off. They're like, hey, why is that any of your business? Most of the time, it's the way that you're asking the question. It's not the question that you asked. It's just the way that you're asking the question. So, for example, if I say, okay, cool, great, awesome. Tell me a little bit about what you have going on with the property. Okay, got it. So you've been living here for like 5 years. Okay, got it. And why are you looking to sell? I sound like a robot. seller's not
Yeah.
going to open up, right? I could use that same script and say something like, okay, and just so I know, like, help me understand what's actually going on with the property though. And I'm slowing them down. I'm using my tone to get them to internalize the question. They might say something like, well, you know, I've had this property for the last 3 years and I've been having to pay the mortgage. Oh my gosh, you've been having to pay the mortgage for 3 years. How much is the mortgage though? I'm using a concern tonality to get them to open up more, right? The seller says, you know, I'm just a little bit worried about the neighborhood. You're worried about the neighborhood in what way? Oh, well, because it's dangerous. We're just teaching you to go deeper and get the seller to really feel those pain points to build urgency. Instead of just taking one layer, them saying, well, I'm worried about the neighborhood. And you say, okay, got it. And then you just move on, right? We're going to go 5 layers deeper to get them to really feel those pain points. Again, people do not change unless the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, right? And so we need to get them to feel those pain points. So they want to change. Not only that, but they're not so focused on the price. They're focused on getting the result. They're focused on getting to that next chapter of their life. Those are like the main differences between what I teach. I don't think that I'm not going to be one of those guys that like shit talks other people. There are people that I would shit talk. His is not one.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And so how long does this time this sales process kind of take? You know,
that's another big difference is a really good sales call. If you really want to understand the seller's problems, you want to help them solve them, get their future state, figure out what they're going on. That's generally a 45-minute to an hour and 20-minute call for a virtual. And then in person, man, I run an in-person team too. They'll be in the living room for 2 hours, just sitting there, building rapport with the seller, feeling all of those pain points. And if you're focused on converting at the highest level, you need to have a real connection. You need to really build rapport with the sellers.
Amazing. I love it. Okay, great. And so what kind of ROI have your students seen by implementing the NEPQ correctly?
Yeah, it's great. So we've actually pulled all of our advanced group, all of our students. We asked them, what was your close rate prior? What was your close rate after? What was your revenue prior? What was your revenue after? And then we ask them like some other questions about their favorite calls and stuff like that. On average, our students will see a 2.16x in their conversion rate. So if they're closing 1 out of 30 leads, they'll go to 1 out of 15. Like on average using this process within 6 months. That's just the average. So obviously some people, like we've had some people that have 10x'd. We've had people that go from like 1 out of 100 to 1 out of 10. We've had, people that have gotten really good results, and then, some people end up being a little bit less. But on average, our students will double their conversions. So again, closing 1 out of 50, they'll go 1 out of 25 within about a 6-month time period. Some people do it a little bit faster. Our average students are typically doing anywhere from like $15,000 to $40,000 a month when they come in, and then on average they leave doing about $83,000 a month, so just about $1 million a year. But we teach people, so this is a big thing. Like I have a school community where I do help newbies do it, but that's not our real focus. Most of the people that we help are already doing deals. They're doing like a deal a month consistently. And we help people that are doing, like we've got a couple guys in our group doing $200K a month, $300K a month. We've got a guy doing $600K a month. So we help like big sales teams as well improve their close rates. So that's really the test of, are you a good sales trainer? If you can just help one person running everything, okay, cool. But how do you help an entire team? How do you help an entire team's close rate go from 10% to 25%? Where it's a repeatable process that everybody can follow and everybody gets better.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Wow. All right. Okay. And just for the people out there that know that know of you and want to get into the school community or the higher the higher tier programs, where is kind of the base, and then what's the mid or entry or highest level in terms of?
So my school community says like, hey, you should be doing a deal already. I think there's a lot of good people out there that teach you like how to get your first deal. I'm not one of them. I actually don't push people to do wholesaling. I think that it's a hard business, and I say like, go get a job first, save some money, then get into it. But if you're wanting to get some better training inside of sales, If you look up the Wholesale Sales Academy, that's my school community. I can send you a link that you can drop in the chat so other people can see it. And then if you are running a business, you're doing like a deal a month, I usually just recommend people book a call with me. So that way I can go through your business, look at your KPIs, your script, and build out a plan to see if our advanced training would actually help you or how we could help you from there.
Guys, he's using it right now on us.
I'm using it right now.
All right, that's awesome. All right, cool. So let me see. I guess, what are your favorite NEPQ style questions to break through objections?
Are you saying go like at the end of a call, like where in your call would this objection, or like give me an example of an objection?
Give me a second. Let's see.
I can tell you a couple. I'll give you a couple without you having to pull it up.
Go ahead.
Like, for example, we all have those type A sellers that are like, hey, just give me an offer or get off the phone, right? You've heard those sellers before? Hey, just give me an offer. I'm not wasting my time with questions. We'll use a playful tonality. So we teach different types of tonality. We'll use a playful tonality, and it sounds like this. They'll say like, you know what? I get 50 calls a day on this. Just give me an offer or get off the phone. You go, well, hold on, bro. You mean to tell me you didn't sign up to get like 50 calls a day on this property? And they're like, they laugh a little bit. They're like, you use sarcasm, right? You mean to tell me you didn't sign up to get 50 calls a day on this? They're like, no, obviously I didn't. Yeah, and you know what? A lot of the people that we've helped in the past have said that. They like fill out a form online. They end up getting tons of calls. And you know what they say? Most of them end up being complete knuckleheads, and they never even get to an offer. Is that kind of what you've been dealing with? Oh my gosh, exactly. That's exactly what I've been dealing with. And then we'll say something like this. Yeah, and you could be better off keeping the house. That's actually why I'm calling. Usually this first call, we just ask a couple questions about the condition, when you're looking to sell, just so we can give you a real offer we can stand behind and we don't waste each other's time. Would that help better if we did that for you? Now notice I'm saying just so we don't waste each other's time. Because what are they concerned about when they say, just give me an offer or get off the phone? They're worried you're going to waste their time. Now, I don't want to say just so we don't waste your time, because that makes it seem like their time is more valuable than mine, right? I'll say something like, that way we don't waste each other's time. Would that be helpful if we did that for you? Right? That's one example of an objection that you get at the beginning of a call, where the seller's like super hostile and you need to be able to disarm them. I could give you a million, but that's one that like everybody probably runs into at the beginning, and you could use that today.
That's really cool. I wanna touch on a little bit. You mentioned that some of the other people that you help, they go from like 100 leads to like 10 or like whatever, just different metrics. But I wanna know, like, what lead source are you guys using? Because for us, it matters greatly, on the different lead sources.
So for us, we use PPC and YouTube, but for our students, like I've got a student doing $75K a month on SMS, just texting, and that's his only channel. I have a lot of guys doing cold calling. We've got a ton of people inside the group that are doing cold calling. Most of the bigger companies that we coach, they do PPC, direct mail, and then they'll do some other like TV ads or something. I wouldn't say that's like the most common, but PPC and direct mail for like the bigger companies that we coach, almost all of them end up doing PPC and direct mail when they get to that high scale. Most of the people when they're starting, they do like cold call and SMS, maybe some PPL. But like for us personally, we like PPC and YouTube. I like to keep everything with Google. I've done other things as well. I've done cold calling, SMS, I've done direct mail. I've done it all. But my favorite channels are the ones that you don't have to sift through a bunch of bad leads to get good ones, Yeah. And so PPC is like, if you can't close PPC leads, you got a problem. They're searching for ways to sell their house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And direct mail is pretty similar. The reason that a lot of the high level guys do direct mail is you can refine that thing over time. And so you might start out, mailing everybody, and then you realize, well, this zip code does the best. And inside this zip code, probates do the best. And then you do that for every zip code that you're in. And then a lot of these guys that are doing direct mail at a high level, they just have a well-oiled machine because they've been doing it for so long. They have so much data of who they should be mailing, how often they should be mailing them, all these little things that you can tweak. So those are the big ones that people do inside of our group and that we do.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, all right, and so you teach. Is it mostly virtual, or like you also teach? People to
50-50.
do 50 in-person appointments. Yeah, 50-50.
Yeah, it's 50-50. Like a lot of our big teams, they run in person. Some of them do a hybrid model. So they'll do like, if it's out of their area, too far to drive, they'll close it virtually. If it's within driving distance, they'll go to it in person. And then we have some straight up virtual teams. I've done both. I ran a straight up in person team. I ran a straight up virtual team. And it just depends on the business that you want. So if you are, your close rate will be a little bit higher, your average deal size will be a little bit higher, and like your contract to close will be higher if you do in person in general. And in a virtual, those will be less, but also you're going to be able to make a lot more offers. And so you're not going out to every single house when you're running an in-person meeting. You're filtering by quality. Whereas
Yeah.
on a virtual team, you can make offers on everything. And so I teach both, and I've done both.
And what do you recommend for people?
It really depends. So, like, if you're in a really competitive market, like, for example, New York, Miami, SoCal, I typically recommend those guys go in person. You really need that competitive edge. If you're doing nationwide, you can't do in home, right?
Of
So,
course.
like, if you're doing deals in your backyard and you live in that area, I would recommend going in home. You're going to have a competitive advantage over the virtual guys, but not everybody wants to do that. I live in Columbia. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm not going to go to my own appointments in Southern California. It just depends on the model. I don't say that I would recommend one out of the other. I would say it depends on, are you local in one market and you're in your backyard? If that's the case, go in home. If you are in like 4 or 5 different markets, probably easier just to do a virtual model and try to make offers on as many people as you can.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool. So, what tools or CRMs are vital to your operation? Like, what's your tech stack?
I have a freaking story behind this, but I'll shorten it. So I used to use Resimply, and Resimply had 95% of the things that I wanted. But as I was growing my team, it was missing some of like the sales dashboards that I wanted. And so I switched to Salesforce, and I spent $50,000 to $60,000 developing it to do all of the things that I want.
Yeah.
And then like 3 months later, Resimply just updated their entire CRM and added everything that I was looking for. And so, like for us, dude, our tech stacks are nothing. Like we try to keep it super minimal. Right now we do use Salesforce still, but I'm probably going to go back to Resimply just because I think Resimply is hands down the best CRM on the market for real estate investors, whether you're getting your first deal or running a team. It's just so good right out of the box. It has everything. Like all my students that do it, they all have their KPIs already tracked, even though they don't know it. Sometimes they don't even know that they have their KPIs. And I'm like, yeah, just pull up this dashboard. KPIs are already there, right?
Wow.
So my tech stack, I use a platform called CTI 360 for dialing and texting. I use Salesforce, and then everything else is just Google ads and YouTube ads with a Zapier hook right to our CRM. We use InvestorLift for Dispo. We use Investor Base for Dispo and comping as well. So we have those 2 platforms.
Yeah.
I think we have batch leads like for properties that we have the MLS, but I like batch leads for looking at property details as well.
Yeah.
That's it, man. We're not like nerds with tech. We're not using any AI or anything like that. Resimply just launched new AI, like a bunch of stuff with AI on their CRM. And that's one of the other reasons I want to go back. They just launched Blue Text. We almost went to just all iMessage, and then we saw Resimply just did it. So we're like, oh, let's hold off. Let's see how that works before we switch back to them. But honestly, man, like to run a 7-figure wholesaling business, you don't need a lot of tech. You need a marketing platform, especially if you're doing PPC and like YouTube, all inbound Facebook leads. Super easy. Start a Meta account, start a YouTube account, zap them to your CRM. And then we also zap to a Google Chat as well. And so all of our team is inside of Google Chats. That's it, bro. It's like super, super simple.
Wow. Okay, cool. So, how much is Resimply?
Oh, I don't know, man. I think it's between like depending on the platform that you do maybe 150 and 750 a month, whereas Salesforce cost me 10 grand to start and then a bunch of development. So I typically don't recommend, unless you're like a big company, you have a tech guy. If you have a tech guy, yeah, do Salesforce, but most wholesalers don't. And so it ends up being just a bunch of headache. At least it was for me. And I think Resimply is the best CRM out there for 99% of real estate investors.
Let me ask you this. So I know that based on some of the real estate companies or courses that I've been through, you know, I know that they do a junior acquisition model and a senior acquisition model where like they live transfer the call. Do you know if Resimply has that feature? Or
you can do that. Like do a live transfer, I'm almost sure you can do that. I think you could do that back when I was, you could do that back when I was using it. So you can definitely still do it now. Yeah, they have some cool things. They also have a speed to lead feature. So when a lead hits your CRM, it calls you, you press 1, and then it automatically dials the lead. That's another really cool thing that they have. I'm sure you could do it inside of Salesforce, but you probably have to develop it. They have AI transcripts to give you like a call summary. The main thing I'll tell you that what I appreciate about Resimply is they just make it so easy to track KPIs. They have everything set up already. So when you get a qualified lead, hit the qualified lead button, automatically goes to your KPIs. You can filter by date range. You can set up, especially like when we used to run 5 to 7 different marketing channels, you have like PPL, but then you could go motivated leads, property leads, iSpeed to lead, lead Zolo. You'd see like all of the different PPL companies and your return on each one, cost per lead on each one, cost per appointment on each one. It does your bookkeeping. It does everything inside of there. So that's my recommended platform for new wholesalers is I usually get them set up on Resimply, even though I went away from them, which was one of my biggest mistakes I've made so far. Not the biggest. I made much worse, but it was one of my biggest ones.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you for taking us down memory lane and giving us the lesson without the scar. So, all right. So let me see here. How long did it take you to hit your first 100K month? And what changed?
So this was 90 days after I invested in NEPQ. I did $141,000 in 1 month, 90 days after investing in NEPQ. But to get to that point, I wholesaled and flipped for 2 years prior. And then just made a bunch of mistakes and didn't really have a sales process. The thing that changed was my sales process. I have a consistent sales process I would follow every single time that spits out consistent results. So I always say an inconsistent process will create inconsistent results. And then once I learned how to talk to sellers and convert leads, 100K a month happened within 90 days. It really isn't that difficult. And to me, I think 100K a month as a wholesaler you're still entry level. You're still kind of getting there. You're not like a big dog at 100K a month.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have a full company until you're doing 5 to 20. That's where like the real big dogs are. So, you can get to 100K a month with one person and a good sales process. That's it. That's all you need.
One person. So just as a solopreneur, you could do that. Yeah.
30K average deal size, 4 deals. You know what I mean? That's 120K a month. And so that's 4 deals a month is doable. Maybe you have a VA that helps you with doing your follow-up and maybe like some of the admin tasks on some of your dispo, but you can easily do 100K a month with one person, maybe 2. And so it's not, you don't need, like a lot of people see 100K a month, they think like, oh my gosh, I have to be this giant business. Well, it depends. Are you doing nationwide and your average deal size is 10K? Yeah, you got to have a pretty big operation. Are you just focusing on, high spreads, simplicity, and high value lead channels like PPC, where 1 out of 10 leads turns into a contract? It's easier if you do it like that. I don't think you could do it with one person doing SMS blast. You know what I mean?
Right.
But there's trade-offs. You're gonna have better profit margins if you did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what was the bottleneck? Was it the sales process that helped you scale?
That was it. And that's the thing I see with hundreds of other companies as well, if you can get, it's a simple game. It's marketing and sales. The thing is, for us, everybody calls the same leads. Like if you're doing PPC, my guess, if you're listening to this and you're doing PPC, somewhere in your keywords, you're bidding on homes for cash, sell my house fast. Like those simple key, everybody's doing it. If you're cold calling foreclosures. You're cold calling probates, right? You're all doing the same marketing. And then the best part is you have people that do done for you marketing now. You have iSpeed to lead where you can buy a la carte. Motivated leads, property leads, all those guys too. They just do the marketing for you. You have agencies like Hustle Media, Alpha Media, Deal Source, like these guys that will run your own ads that have decades of experience. You just can't outsource. I don't know of a single company that lets you outsource your closing. That's the main thing. And if you can convert deals better than everybody else, you have the same marketing channels, you can just convert deals better than everybody else. What's going to stop you from being successful? Nothing. It's really just a sales game at the end of the day. And then once you start scaling, it becomes a hiring game. It becomes like hiring people and duplicating yourself, hiring good salespeople to close. I would say flipping's a little bit different because then you're project management too. But for wholesale, bro, it's a sales game. That's it. And that was the bottleneck for me.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about your biggest average, your biggest profitable deal ever, and how did that come about?
You mind if I look real quick with it to give you the exact number?
Yeah.
$123,680 PPC lead. That's it. It's $123,680. I mean that's the biggest, but the second place is $109,022. 98,000. I mean, I'm actually just looking at the past couple quarters, so maybe there's some more in there. But yeah, man, like we have multiple six figures. We usually will get 1 or 2 six-figure deals per quarter, and I'll tell you, like that one was in Diamond Bar, California. The 123, the one that was 109 was Sylmar, California. 98 was National City, California. So, I mean, we mostly are in California, but that's most of our big deal spreads. Our average deal size is 50,200. And those, I'm looking at them right now, the lead channels, and PPC is mainly it. One of them was YouTube. One of them was iSpeed to lead.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So how many leads does it take for you to get a contract in your business? And then
1 in 11 for PPC.
1 in 11. Okay. And then how many of your contracts get
sold? Close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close.
So this number has shifted around depending on if we're in person or virtual. So when we're running our in-person model, it's typically like we've got it all the way up to 90%, but it typically is in like the high 80s. And then virtual, it's typically in the low 70s. So like a virtual model, we're typically about like 72%. And then on an in-person model, closer to 87% if I'm averaging them out. So generally, if we're at 70%, we're like, okay, 75% is our target. 70% is where we end up being.